Are you shocked? Like, I have figured all of this out by this point. Is right up my alley. I want to talk more about that. Terrible, honestly. Character reader. What can I say? Hey, y'all, it's Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today. And for this video, we're going to be talking about my best books of the year and also a few of my worst books. All right, so before I get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, and you have to tell me in the comments what is the best book you read this year. So this year was one of those where I actually had a really hard time coming up with this stack. The stack is in no particular order. We will work through these babies. I've been actively editing this for days now, for weeks, because I keep debating. I really had such a hard time figuring out like what books did I want to put at the top of the year. And there are some books that actually I would say could constitute some of my best books of the year, but I already talked about them in my most surprising, so I also highly recommend them. I'll put a link to that video up above. This has been subject to change many a times. I have tried to rank them and it hasn't gone great. So we're just gonna kind of work our way through these. But first, let's go ahead and get the depressing ones out of the way by talking about the worst books I read this year. And I didn't really have many, thank God. The vast majority of my worst books of the year actually were already talked about in my most disappointing books, and that's going to be the Queen's Trilogy by E.K. Johnston. This is the Padme Amidala series that I was really hoping to enjoy when I got to it in my Star Wars canon project, but unfortunately it was such a letdown. Like I said, it was on my most disappointing list as well, so I'll go ahead and put a link to that video up above because I did rant about it for a good few minutes. I also have to mention Library Wars Volume 5, specifically by 𝗖ście. Across the board, I really did enjoy this manga series. I would say it's like a very solid 4-star. It's a shoujo manga where we were following Kashihara, and she has just recently joined the Library Task Force in this country. There is a breakdown between states and the national government, and while the national government is trying to uphold freedom of speech, some of the state governments unfortunately are trying to censor certain works, and so this Library Task Force has been created to try and fight against censorship. Now, Kashihara at the start of the series is also kind of having this enemies to lovers secret relationship thing with her boss, Dojo. Honestly, that element, there's plenty there that I could have not liked, and there's a few problems with that romance that's not my favorite. However, that was nothing in comparison to the side romance with, oh god, I never remember the guy's name, Dojo's partner, and he has a romance with his next door neighbor, which is this young woman who is hard of hearing, and her hearing has progressively gotten worse over the years, and a way they have bonded is through books. That's great. I really love that. However, there's a drastic age gap between these two, and for a lot of it, she's underage. Then they like finally take a step into making this a romantic relationship, and I think she's like 16. No. The relationship itself also just wasn't very well written to the point where like it felt romantic. Instead, a lot of their interactions in the beginning feel like he is an older brother to her, which just kind of worsened that, especially as somebody who has older brothers. No, the romance appears a few times throughout the series, but it's most prevalent in Volume 5. I think that plot line took up majority of the volume, so yeah, that's why this one is on my worst books of the year, because I'm still not over it. I don't know why this was included. The next one is a book that like I kind of feel bad putting it here because I think this book could have an audience. I definitely feel like it needed more editing, and that's going to be This Cursed House by Del Sandine. I liked the idea of this book where we're following a woman who ends up traveling down to New Orleans in order to work for this family, but unfortunately when she arrives to the home, she comes to find out this family is a little odd. In fact, they actually believe that they are cursed and that Gemma is the one who will be able to break this curse. I really enjoy Southern Gothic stories, so because of that, I was really hopeful for this book, but even for a Gothic story, this book was way too slow and far too long. I think the plot itself is actually rather well done, but it takes so long to get there that by the time we were getting answers, nothing was surprising. I have figured all of this out by this point. I really enjoyed the themes that were woven into the book, but there was also a lot happening in the plot, so I felt like none of the themes really got to be explored to their full extent. And while the atmosphere was very well done, that's something I always do enjoy with Southern Gothic stories, because of some of the other problems I have with this book, it just added to the issue of dragging the story down and really slowing the pace to just a snail's crawl. Like I said, I actually do think there were some really solid things in this book, but it needed to be cut down. It needed some editing. I could have liked this, but it really just did not stick the landing. So unfortunately, based on my compile breakdown on it, it ended up being one of my worst books of the year. But enough about those. Let's officially talk about my best books for 2025, and I'm so excited. These are in no particular order. In fact, they're kind of like mixed in based on genre, if anything. So I guess let's go ahead and start from the top with the best romance books I read this year. Starting first is Float Plan by Trish Doller. This is actually one of the earliest books I read in the year for a Raid My Shelves most popular romance books, I believe it was. So I'll put a link to that in the cards. And I really liked this. I was so glad to finally get around to it. I'm very impressed with the fact that this short little novel had such phenomenal character work. We are following Anna, yes, who unfortunately her fiance has recently passed by taking his own life. And he had this sailboat that he loved. They had this plan that eventually they were going to fix up this boat, travel with it, I think down through the Caribbean and into South America, but obviously that didn't end up happening. But Anna officially kind of takes that jump and decides to live out Ben's dream. Not long in, she ends up meeting Keen, who actually is a sailor, but unfortunately has suffered his own loss and is now a amputee. Unfortunately, because of that, it has affected his job prospects. So she ends up hiring him to travel down with her. And eventually the forced proximity just starts to be a little too much for them. This was so good. Again, in the character work for Anna, there's not actually a perspective for Keen's character, but I think there's a lot there in his character as well that's really well done. The way these two connect, the relationship that develops between them is so sweet and so pure, but at the same time, both of these characters had a lot of spunk, a lot of moxie. While Anna sort of starts this book running away from her life, she ends up finding a new life for herself that she loves much more and a new happiness for herself. And off of that kind of leads into some great discussions around the grief she is still suffering after Ben's passing. But also there's this great travel writing in the book too, which is really fun. There's just so much compassion between the two characters, and the relationship that develops just feels very authentic. I really, really liked this one. Unfortunately, it was my favorite of the series. The rest of them kind of went downhill as it went, but this one still deserves a spot on my shelves. I really enjoyed it, and I can definitely see myself rereading this one. Obviously, I did have a ton of tabs working through this because again, the character work was just so good. Next one, I could definitely say the same. The character work is phenomenal, but it's not just the character work that really sold me on this. Well, actually, by Maisie Eddings, I have really enjoyed almost everything I've read from Maisie Eddings at this point, but this is definitely my favorite. And I know it's because so much of the characterization between these two is right up my alley. The interactions that they have can almost be constituted as mean. Ava, our female main character, is on a show kind of reminiscent of like Hot Ones, except she's eating hot dogs, interviewing like C and D list celebrities. She has a mortal enemy in Riley Cooper, this guy who has made his name in podcasting, talking about toxic masculinity and how to be a better partner, how you can be a feminist and a good ally, making space for those around you, how that can improve your relationships. But this rankles Ava so much because Riley is the worst boyfriend she ever had. So after a rough day of work, she ends up getting a little wine tipsy and making a bit of a rant on Instagram about how Riley is the worst. This sort of blows up in her face pretty quickly, but her bosses decide to capitalize on this and bring Riley onto the show, where he proposes that they go on a few dates and he can showcase to her that he has truly changed. He has really grown up, and oh, it is so good. It's like kind of fake dating-ish, but also there's a great forced proximity because of their jobs. Definitely some enemies lovers. Ava's certainly working through some stuff, and I really loved that we can see through her memories of Riley and then through how she experiences him now, the change he has gone through, the growth he has worked through, and how Ava kind of is still needing to do that a little bit herself. Her calling him names and him begging for more is like one of my favorite things about this book. Her pet name for him is Baby Girl, and he loves it. One of my tabs in here is actually just for their banter because it's so much fun, and I really loved how the third act conflict worked out here. It's an external thing, and though one of the characters tries to make it a problem in their relationship, the other doesn't let that happen. They put their foot down and make the person talk things out, and really it's so healthy. I want more of those kind of third act conflicts, even though there's a lot of drama there. It's not because they're not talking. It's not because of something silly and ridiculous. It's actually something that's very realistic, and I really, really enjoyed how Eddings did it, but also just like this book was so much fun. I think next up, let's talk about sci-fis. First up is A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This is the second in the Wayfarer series. I had the first one on my most surprising books of the year because it's cozy sci-fi, and sci-fi is definitely something I enjoy, but cozy is not so much. Becky Chambers, though, apparently just knows what she's doing for me because this has been going swimmingly. In this sequel, we are following 𝗖cie, who we meet in the first book as an AI. However, now she actually has a body kit of her own and is traveling off with her friend Pepper and trying to find what a new life is going to look like for herself. I tend to really enjoy AI characters in sci-fi stories and the discussions that come up with those, and that's definitely something that was prevalent here. But the character work that is done between 𝗖cie and then also the other perspective we see, Jane, this young girl who is unfortunately bred to be free labor on a small planet off in the galaxy. The parallels that are done between the two of them, even though their circumstances are very different, so much of what they're working through is really similar. And I loved the character work that was done there. The relationships that 𝗖cie starts to develop with the people around her. The talks of body autonomy that also come up in this were so good. I'm really intrigued to see what the author has planned for the next book in the series, but I also just really like the sci-fi universe Chambers has created here. There's a lot of interesting elements, and while some of them that were presented in the first book were dived into here, I'm really hopeful that other ones which were presented in the first book will be dived into in future installments. I want to talk more about that. So yeah, I'm so glad I continued on with this series. Really, really liked this one. Can you tell I am a character reader? Are you shocked? Next sci-fi, I have to talk about my girl Lorna D with Tempest Breaker by Cavan Scott. This is kind of like a second in an unofficial duology of the Star Wars universe following Lorna D. When we first meet her, she is a general for this pirate slash mobster group called the Nihil. And in the first one, we get to see how she became the person that she is, but then also her run from the Jedi after doing some shady stuff. This time around, though, Lorna has been captured. She is atoning for her crimes. She's not particularly happy about this, but when given the opportunity to bring the Nihil down, she's interested. That requires working with the Jedi who were hunting her down. Oh, it was so good. I love Lorna. She's so much fun. She's a very chaotic character to follow. She is out for herself, but I think you actually can see some really good growth from her just between these two audio dramas. Unfortunately, what with like the setup of the Star Wars universe and this audio drama coming out after some of the other books had released, the events in the grand scheme of the plot don't really matter. Like they don't really do much of anything. This one is one where like really the thing I loved most about it is just getting to see more of my girl Lorna. The back and forth with the Jedi characters, namely Avar Kriss, who is one that I've personally found very boring for most of the other novels she's been involved in. This is probably the first time I actually really enjoyed getting to see Avar. And it comes down to the bickering and the forced proximity that these two are put into. Like I said, you get to see a little bit of the end of Lorna's story, and I really enjoyed it. I'm gonna miss her. I would love another book following her and the events after she has left this whole situation, but I don't think that's gonna happen, sadly. Next, let's talk horror books. So horror is actually one of my most read genres for the year, which is wild to me, and I'm so glad for that because I've really been enjoying the horror I pick up. This is another genre where like I had a hard time settling on what books of the year were my favorites. This first one I definitely have to say is a favorite because of the enjoyment I got from it. That's gonna be 𝗖𝗄ine by Delilah S. Dawson. I knew I was gonna enjoy this going in because it kept getting pitched as The Menu meets Ready or Not, which is two of my favorite horror films. In this, we are following Des, who is a fashion student and ends up dating this guy who is terrible, honestly, but his mom is like the head of this big name fashion magazine, and she thinks if she can get her way into this lady's good graces, she might secure herself a job. So when she is invited along with her boyfriend to this Easter weekend at his family's island, she jumps on it, but pretty quickly things take a turn for the worst when the help start to fight back. This is 100% like an eat the rich survival horror story, and it is so much fun. Des is very unfortunately like in the wrong place at the wrong time, so you're just rooting for her to try and survive, but given the circumstances, you're also rooting for the people who are hunting down this family. It's super fast paced. It reads so quickly, but there's also some phenomenal gore in this. Like some of these scenes are just gonna stick up here because they're original and creative and kind of clever, honestly. I don't think the themes of the story are especially subtle. I mean, like it is was pretty on the nose, but again, enjoyment factor, it hit it out of the ballpark. This was a home run. I had such a good time reading this, and I can't wait to read more from this author. Next up, I've got A Certain Hunger by 𝗖cie 𝗁𝘁, and this is kind of a mix between an enjoyment, but I also loved the themes that were happening here. We are following Dorothy, who is a food critic, and eventually we come to see that she has taken to eating people. I really liked the layout of this one, as every chapter is like a different food item or recipe, and it kind of ties in a normal element of Dorothy's life and then the more unhinged side. This is another one where it's got this really great kind of devolution of a character, but also like evolution. Dorothy is such a fascinating villain here, but like, I wouldn't say you root for her, but like you're fascinated by her and you just want to watch her story unfold. Really, really reminiscent of like Hannibal Lecter sort of thing, which I loved. The food writing that is done here is delicious, but also gory and unsettling and weird. I really, really like how unapologetic Dorothy was. I loved the characterization of her at the start. Just the person she was before she started making these jumps, slowly learning more about her and seeing like how we reached this point and where things took a turn. It was so interesting. I really worked through this very quickly. I can't wait to read more from Summers because this was so well done. The writing is just absolutely exquisite and unsettling. It's really lush. I wouldn't call it beautiful because sometimes the descriptions are like downright disgusting. The terminology or metaphors she would use would just be unsettling, but also like such a perfect visual description. Definitely has just been hanging out in my head whenever I read stories that are kind of reminiscent to it. It's hard not to compare elements of those to this and how much I enjoyed this. Like I said, I can't wait to read more from Summers because this was so good. Then I have Bat Eater by Kylie Lee Baker, and I loved this one, probably because it encapsulates everything I tend to enjoy in horror put into one story. So in this, we're following Cora, who is a bit of a germaphobe. And unfortunately for her, this is set during the pandemic, where she has actually taken her enthusiasm for cleaning and made it into a job working for a crime scene cleanup group. But she starts to take notice of an unusual fact that keeps connecting all of these cases where Asian people are unfortunately being taken out. I actually went into this expecting more of a thriller, contemporary setting, but it does have this sort of fantastical element. It's very much like a, do you believe Cora or not? Is she actually seeing these things or is it all in her head? And kind of watching as that element unfolds to see what's the answer actually going to be. I also really enjoyed Cora's characterization in this one. I'm just, again, character reader. What can I say? I thought the gore was very well done. I really liked the ties to some broader themes, the discussion around racism, especially the racism that took place during COVID. I also liked that Cora, as a woman who is biracial, is kind of stuck in the middle of these two cultures and seeing the ways that has affected how she grew up, the life she leads now, her relationships with the people around her, with her family members. Like I said, so many things about this that were just very up my alley. I really loved the ending here. It's definitely one of those that like, you can't use it all the time. It's definitely gonna be like a little bit out there and some people are not gonna like it. Let's just be flat out there. Some people are not going to enjoy it, but personally, I love it. I love when a book takes this turn. It's wild to me. So another horror book that definitely is just floating around in my mind constantly. I am highly anticipating her next horror, Japanese Gothic. I cannot wait to get my hands on that one. Now let's talk about fantasy. So first up is Shorefall by Robert Jackson Bennett. So I read Boundary Side 2 years ago, I think. And no, maybe it was just last year. And I loved it. For once, the characters were not the first thing that sold me on it. Instead, I really liked the Venetian-inspired world and the magic system that the author created here. I've talked about it a lot lately. Scribings, which is very reminiscent of the coding that you put on inanimate objects. And it was super interesting how the author created it and then utilized it to do certain things in this world. With this second one, I really loved the exploration and expansion around scribing, but also this is the one where the characters definitely grew on me more. I liked them in the first, but here we have a little found family and I loved them. There's a little bit of a romance that goes on with one of our main characters, Sancha, and then her girlfriend Bernice. We've got Gregor, who's like the stiff upper lip uncle that's got a heart of gold, and then we have Orzo, who's like the crabby uncle. But it doesn't matter what you get into, he's gonna be there for you. As is another character that I love dearly and I can't talk too much about because of spoilers, but also in this one is a phenomenal villain. I really liked the villain here. The way he is described is so unsettling, is so creepy, so powerful. There's this charisma about him, and there are little elements of his background that get fed to us, but there are so much more that gets explored as the story continues and continues on in the final book as well. Unfortunately, if you did watch my disappointments, I wasn't the biggest fan of how this series ended on the whole, but this book was a roller coaster ride. It hurt my feelings at the end. It was also so good. It was really, really good. Okay, last and definitely, most definitely not least, if anything, this is like probably up there for most, is the Last Binding trilogy by Freya Marks. So we have A Marvelous Light, A Restless Truth, and A Power Unbound. I feel like every year I have one series that I read the first book, I love it, and I just like immediately want to continue reading. So I actually read A Marvelous Light in the same video where I read Float Plan, and also really, really enjoyed it. So we start out following Robin and Edwin. Robin has just taken on this job and he doesn't really know what he's getting himself into. Come to find out, apparently there are wizards in London and he is actually sort of the liaison to this wizarding community in the British government. And unfortunately for him, not long after starting this job, he gets pulled into this mystery of what happened to his predecessor and also this magical artifact that his predecessor was searching for. And that mystery does kind of span across all three of these books. It is definitely a roller coaster ride. In the first, we have Robin and Edwin. The next one has Maud and Violet. Maud is Robin's little sister. And then finally, we have Jack and Alan. Jack is actually sort of ex-boyfriends with Edwin from the first book. I loved the characters across the board. Again, the little found family that develops off of this. The romances and all of them took me away. I was swooning over every single one of them. The spicing. You want a little kink mixed in with some romantasy? Here you go. Got you right here. As much as I enjoyed the first one where, you know, we kind of are really getting dropped into this magical world right alongside Robin, the second one has a closed room murder mystery feel because we are on a cruise ship. And then this third one is where things really go off the walls with the magic. The one thing I will say about this universe on the whole is I never got 100% grasp of the magic system. It's described as like finger signs, kind of like you know, the hand signs they do in Naruto. That's all I could ever picture. It doesn't matter. I was taken away with the world, with the characters, with the romance, with the mystery. I was invested the entire way through. I blasted through these last books whenever I picked them up on audio. This is one where like I cannot wait to reread these. I can't wait to pick them back up and return to this world, these characters, and the love stories that develop between all of them. That's how I know a book series is a new favorite, when I am like itching to pick it up again. I really wanted to for December, but trying to focus on books I've been saying I was going to reread for years now before I add to that list. So this is one I literally can't stop singing its praises. I love the first book. I think my love just increased with each book. And off of these, I definitely need to check out what Marsk has come out with next. Okay, y'all. So on that note, that is officially it for today. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, let's leave a heart emoji in the comments. I have links to all of my socials, as well as a few ways you can support me down in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!